Good afternoon and welcome back to the conference. My name is Ali Stickings and I'm a research fellow in the military sciences team here at RUSI. This session, we're going to be looking at the supporting mechanisms enabling precision strike competitions. We're going to explore the role of disruptive technologies such as artificial intelligence and space-based ISR in enabling operations. Asking questions such as how are states adapting to take advantage of these enablers and what are the implications that we might see from their wider use. So we have three speakers to help guide us through these questions. First up, we'll have Dr. Peter Layton, who is an Associate Fellow of RUSI. Then we'll have Lieutenant General Henry Obering, who's the former Director of the Missile Defense Agency in the US. And then we'll hear from Dr. Sarah Kirchberger, from the Institute for Security Policy at Kiel University in Germany. Each is going to speak for about 10 minutes, and that should leave us plenty of time for Q&A and some discussion. So Peter, over to you.
Hi. Can I have that slide up now, thanks? If you're there. Excellent, thank you very much. Hi, my talk's title comes from the late Wayne Hughes' numerous works on fleet warfare tactics. Like all insightful phrases, it's a statement of the obvious, but it's arguably central to both modern warfare and in particular prompt strike. Today's state-and-state warfare is based on the clever use of a limited number of very effective, very costly platforms. The loss of even a small number of these could swing the war one way or the other, as these platforms cannot be quickly replaced. The first attack may decide the war, but only if that attack is effective, hence attack effectively first. Such prompt strike actions involve combining numerous technologies. Artificial intelligence is now joining these. Importantly, modern narrow AI is not a standalone actor. Rather, it works in combination with numerous other digital technologies. It enlivens these technologies, giving them a form of cognition. So AI is a general purpose technology, steadily becoming all pervasive across society, as we all know. In a similar way, AI will progressively infuse most military machines and systems. This general purpose nature means AI will initially be employed within existing operational thinking. For the foreseeable future, AI will enable the battlefield, not remake it. Hidden in this are some issues to unpack, and I'll use the C domain to illustrate these. In this, I'd like you to see the C domain as just another prompt strike domain. It has depth, pun intended. Conceptually, the deep battlefield in war at sea ranges from the nearest adversary warship to the depths of the Navy's national and international support base. However, it is a hard case for prompt strike. Ships are mobile. Unlike the fixed or relocatable targets prompt strike debates usually focus on. Simultaneous attacks across the entire depth of the adversary's layout may bring significant gains. Firstly, such prompt strikes may force each element of the hostile battle network to fight independently. Secondly, the adversary may be denied retreat. There is now no safe harbour to withdraw to and adopt a fleet-in-being strategy. Thirdly, with simultaneous attacks on near and deep targets, the adversary's fighting resources may be stretched to the breaking point. Lastly, the operational flow of the adversary command and control system may be interrupted, creating a cognitive sense of impending catastrophic battle network fragmentation. This is all standard prompt strike stuff, equally applicable to the land, air, cyber, and space domain. In the near to medium term, AI's principal attraction is in being able to quickly identify patterns and detect items hidden within very large data troves. AI will make it much easier to detect, localise and identify objects across the battle space. Hiding will become increasingly difficult. However, AI is not perfect. It has well-known problems in being able to be misled, in being brittle, being unable to transfer knowledge, gaining one task to another, and being dependent on data. In soundbite terms, AI's main warfighting utility appears find and fool. AI with its machine learning is excellent at finding items concealed within a high clutter background. In this role, AI is better than humans and tremendously faster. On the other hand, AI can be fooled through various means. AI's great find capabilities lack robustness. And on the second part, finding things. Wayne Hughes also stressed good scouting. It is more than manoeuvre, as much as weapon range, and often as much as anything else, the determining factor in war at sea. Accurately ascertaining where ships are in vast ocean battle spaces has never been easy. Since the early 20th century, however, maritime surveillance technology has been steadily improving. AI will strengthen this long-term trend. The Ocean of Things program, devised by the US Defence Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, seeks maritime situational awareness over large ocean areas through deploying thousands of small, low-cost floats that form a distributed sensor network. Each smart float has a suite of commercially available sensors to collect environmental and activity data. The latter involves automatically detecting, tracking and identifying nearby ships and potentially close aircraft traffic. The floats use edge processing with trained detection algorithms and then transmit the semi-processed data periodically via the Iridium satellite constellation to a cloud computing network for onshore handling. Real-time analysis using AI machine learning then uncovers insights from this sparse data. The Ocean of Things concept suggests what is feasible using AI. In addition to floats, there are numerous other low-cost AI-enabled mobile devices already plying the ocean, expanding maritime situational awareness. These include the Emily hurricane trackers, sea gliders, wave gliders, and Australia's OSIS technology blue bottles. In addition to these autonomous surface and subsurface devices, there is an increasing number of small sats being launched into low Earth orbit. Most of these small sats will use AI and edge computing. Some will be able to detect naval vessels using imaging or electronic sensors. Most of them will also be commercial. All of this data from new sources can be combined with that from the existing large array of traditional maritime surveillance systems that range across space-based systems, aircraft, surface ships, and undersea sensors. The next advance may be the US Navy's proposed medium unmanned surface vessel, which could cruise autonomously at sea for 2 months with a surveillance payload. The idea of a digital ocean is now becoming practical. This concept envisages the big data from thousands of persistent and mobile sensors being analysed by AI neural networks, trained over time through machine learning, and then fused to form a detailed, ocean-spanning, three-dimensional comprehensive digital model. This is a difficult challenge, but near real-time digital models of smaller spaces, for example, enclosed waters like the South China Sea, or a national littoral zone, appears possible. A key requirement is having considerable background data of the desired area built up over a long period of time across different oceanic and climatic conditions. Given such data, AI processing can more quickly and reliably detect changes in the environment, including the movement of naval forces within it. On the AI-enabled battlefield, pre-conflict data collection and analysis lays the foundation for later combat success. Being able to create a digital ocean model may prove revolutionary. William Williamson of the US Naval Postgraduate School declares, on the observable ocean, the Navy must assume that every combatant will be trackable, with position updates occurring many times per day. The Navy will have lost the advantages of invisibility, uncertainty, and surprise. Vessels will be observable in port with the time of departure known to within hours or even minutes. This is true for submarines as well as for surface ships. Now I'll go to the last bit. Too many things. That all sounded wonderful, but all this cuts both ways. AI is commercial technology that has widely proliferated. Any assumptions that the adversary is not also using AI is unwise, with both sides likely to have devised digital ocean models. The importance of deception and confusion operations significantly increases. This fool function of AI may become as vital as the find function. In the war at sea, the multiple AI-enabled systems deployed across the battle space offer numerous possibilities for fooling the adversary. Deception involves reinforcing the perceptions or expectations of an adversary commander and then doing something else. However, its effectiveness is rather uncertain, as the thinking of the other commander will always be somewhat unknown. In this, multiple false cues need seeding, as some will be missed by an adversary, and having more than one only adds to the deception credibility. For example, a number of uncrewed surface vessels could set sail as a warship leaves port, all effectively transmitting a noisy facsimile of the warship's electronic and acoustic signatures. The digital ocean may then suggest to the commander that multiple identical warships are at sea, creating some uncertainty as to which is real or not. In terms of confusion, the intent might be not to avoid detection, as this might be difficult, but instead prevent an adversary from classifying vessels detected as warships or identifying them as a specific class of warship. This might be done using some of the large array of AI-enabled floaters, gliders, autonomous devices, underwater vehicles, and uncrewed surface vessels to considerably confuse the digital ocean picture. The aim would be to change the empty oceans, or at least the operational area, into a seemingly crowded, cluttered, confusing environment where detecting and tracking the real warships was problematic and at best fleeting. If AI can find targets, AI can also obscure them. The AI-enabled battle space can create a different war, but it might be more like the past than we currently think. AI, machine learning, big data, the Internet of Things, and cloud computing appear set to create an observable battle space. Equally, AI might thwart that vision of a future perfect. Attack effectively first may be as hard tomorrow as it was yesterday. Prompt strike might need to go slowly. And with that's the end.
Peter, thank you so much for that. I thought it was very interesting and actually very helpful to the way that you put AI into a context that we can understand. And sort of grounded a little bit, and also just reminding us of the challenges of and the reality that we might actually see by employing AI into our operations. Just quickly before we move on, a reminder to start putting in your questions, and if you do have a question specifically for one of the speakers, please do let us know so we can direct it appropriately. If we could move on, please, General Henry.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to address this audience today. I believe that there's been several key times in history where technology has proved to be disruptive on the battlefield and changed the face of warfare, and I think we're seeing one of those periods today. I remember back in 1976 when I was flying the F-4E Phantom, many of my instructors had just returned from Vietnam, and they talked quite a bit about the new laser-guided bombs and the dramatic effect that they had on precision strike in that war, and how they had replaced, with just a few precise attacks, they had replaced, in some cases, dozens and dozens of sorties with hundreds of bombs. And of course, we saw it happen in 2014 when a column of Ukrainian battalions was attacked with an intense artillery barrage that turned out to have been targeting or using drones as targeting for that. And of course, the reports were that nearly an entire battalion had been destroyed in a matter of minutes. But lasers and drones can not only be used for targeting, but also as weapons themselves, as we've seen on several occasions. Last August, a Turkish-made 50-kilowatt laser destroyed a Chinese-made armed drone that's the equivalent of the U.S. MQ-9 Reaper. So laser weapons are becoming more and more popular. The Army plans to field Stryker vehicles armed with 50-kilowatt anti-missile, anti-drone lasers by 2023. Russia says it's developed a vehicle-mounted combat laser. America and Russia are both developing laser weapons for their ships, their fighters. Germany's working on a laser cannon for its warships. And Israel, of course, wants lasers for its Iron Dome missile defense system. So precise targeting and weaponization of directed energy and drone technology can be disruptive. But what could be next for these and other capabilities? Now, what I believe is that we'll see a much broader integration of these technologies, modern technologies such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, peer-to-peer communications, massive processing power, manufacturing and materials development, combined with a major move to fully leverage the space environment. To understand what that future may hold, sometimes it's instructive to look in the past. I think many international observers were very much surprised by the lethality and the speed of the American Desert Storm operation. And in fact, many observers believe that it was this display of military power that was a catalyst in China's long-term strategy to not only equal the U.S., but to dominate globally today that we're seeing. The key elements of that power were founded in precision targeting, use of stealth technology, and most importantly, the ability to bring space-based capabilities to bear. And as I said earlier, I believe that we're at a historical point where these disruptive technologies and more importantly, integration will have a major impact on the battlefield. I believe space will play an increasingly vital role in the future of warfare, as demonstrated by the stand-up of the U.S. Space Force. The commander of that force, General Jay Raymond, has stated, today, quote, we are entering into a defining period for this country in space. We have an expansive spirit of experimentation and exploration. Our nation is strongest when space is secure and stable, accessible to enterprising Americans and economic and scientific pursuits around the globe. But we are also on the cusp of a tectonic shift in warfare. Access to space can no longer be assumed. It must be underpinned by strength. And if deterrence fails, I'm convinced that the next major conflict with a peer competitor will be won or lost in space, unquote. And so the U.S. Space Force is already looking to move what classically has been terrestrially based capabilities into space to dramatically enhance their lethality and effectiveness. I'll give you another example from Desert Storm. The Joint Stars aircraft, which was used in the detection and targeting of Iraqi tanks and armored vehicles using its powerful radar with ground-moving target indicator capabilities, is that the U.S. Space Force is looking to move this capability to space. Space will also be the focus of the next-generation missile defense capabilities to be able to handle not only missiles from Iran and North Korea, but also China and Russia. The U.S. Missile Defense Agency, or MDA, has already successfully used space-based precision tracking in their medium and long-range intercept test with their space tracking and surveillance system demonstration satellites. In fact, last November 16th, a sea-based Aegis SM-3 Block 2A missile was fired from the destroyer USS John Finn off the coast of Hawaii that successfully intercepted an ICBM target fired from the Kwajalein Islands. The intercept was completed with only the precision tracks from the STSS satellites overhead. By the way, intercepting a warhead the size of a small chair flying faster than 8 kilometers per second at a range of thousands of miles and hitting within inches of the aim point is what I call precision strike. The operational version of that precision space-based tracking capability will be the Hypersonic and Ballistic Tracking and Surveillance System, or HBTSS, which has completed ground characterization and phenomenology experiments and is on track to launch their first 2 satellites in just 2 years. The Missile Defense Agency has also deployed a space-based kill assessment capability that is currently being operationalized. What this means is a major impact to be able to dramatically change shot doctrine and preserve very vital interceptor inventories. Now, teamed up with U.S. Space Force, MDA is on track to have all of its ground and sea-based sensors complete the first phase of upgrades and testing to support space domain awareness mission via the tasking of MDA's Command and Control Battle Management and Communication System. So for missile defense, space-based sensors with precision tracking capability will allow birth-to-death tracking of threat missiles globally. This would in turn significantly improve the ability to discriminate lethal warheads from decoys and countermeasures and to keep track of maneuvering threats, whether they're hypersonic or not. Looking to the future, I see space-based interceptors and directed energy weapons combined with the modern commercially based technologies having a dramatic effect on the ability to deter and, if necessary, defend and win against peer and near-peer threats. This is especially true if the space constellations are populated and orbitally positioned to achieve boost and ascent phase intercepts. But even an ability to intercept only in the mid-course phase would greatly contribute to thinning large raids of enemy missiles. A space-based missile defense layer with a large dispersed constellation of highly maneuverable nanosats can potentially provide versatile options in detection, tracking, and interception of current and future missile threats that cannot easily be or completely be countered. Autonomous swarming techniques could be used by high delta V nanosats to precisely coordinate their movements to create synthetic array apertures for ultra high resolution and sensitivity passive sensors to detect and to track ballistic, advanced cruise missile and hypersonic threats, and to provide intel on enemy capabilities prior to any conflict. Now, some would say that these types of capabilities are not available or would certainly cost too much to develop and deploy, but they would be wrong. We have all the technologies needed today to build such capabilities. The issue is that they're not resident in our normal defense firms. They're emerging from our commercial Silicon Valley firms and other locations. For example, these capabilities are possible with a combination of ultra-fast processors and extreme storage devices from companies like NVIDIA, peer-to-peer communications from capabilities like Uber, nanosats and launch vehicles from SpaceX, and last but certainly not least, the artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities from companies like mine at Booz Allen Hamilton. Let's examine a couple of very realistic scenarios that could apply these technologies. In the first case, we would have 90 satellites in low Earth orbit, which are providing tracking and communication capabilities only to augment our terrestrially based missile defense systems. As a result, a threat missile launched from North Korea toward the United States could be tracked continuously by more than one satellite from its launch through its entire trajectory. If we populate 20 low Earth orbits with 50 nanosats per orbit, this would give us 1,000 nanosats with communication, tracking, and intercept capabilities. This would be at least 6 opportunities for intercepting a threat missile from North Korea, including a boost ascent phase option. One very interesting aspect of these is the ability to command and control at the edge. In other words, we don't need a centralized control center when we incorporate artificial intelligence and machine learning into the constellations. These swarming EO/IR or nanosats could be used to organize themselves into formations that would behave as synthetic apertures. Resulting integrated fields of view would provide significant improvements in overall resolution and clutter rejection capabilities to acquire and track even hypersonic threats. As I stated earlier, the flights would be able to target, communicate, and deconflict using today's technologies. So how do you identify which missile launches are friendly or hostile? One of the advantages of AI neural networks combined with the incredible processing power of today's graphic processing units is the ability to train the satellites. We could provide millions of data elements representing nearly all possible category of launches to allow the constellations to determine which launches are threatening or non-threatening. Data elements such as launch azimuth, insertion angles, orbital dynamics, physical attributes, and much, much more. But would these capabilities be affordable? Well, using the calculations of the former Undersecretary of Defense Research and Engineering, Dr. Mike Griffin, he calculated that 1,000 nanosat constellation at 20 kilograms each, including the development and deployment costs, would be less than $20 billion. You compare that to the investment the U.S. made in the ground-based mid-course defense system of more than $30 billion, which has delivered 44 interceptors and several associated radars and command and control centers. In the field of high-energy lasers, significant progress is being made not only with the scaling up of laser output power and improving beam quality, but also dramatic advancements in thermal and power management to reduce the size, weight, and input power needed. In fact, in a recent conversation I had with several of our national lab scientists and engineers, they indicated that within a reasonable funding profile, the U.S. could have a megawatt-class laser capable of being carried on high-altitude UAVs or even space-based platforms in a reasonable period of time. And I know much about this, having been the director of Missile Defense Agency when we were flying the airborne laser. So in closing, we are on the cusp of another technological revolution that we must lead. The integration of new technologies such as AI and ML, communications and processing capabilities will have a dramatic effect on warfare. We must be able to operate unhindered in space and be able to defend ourselves in and from space. The movement of missile defense of space is not only critically needed, I believe it's inevitable with the continued growth of the threats. Space-based sensors can have a dramatic effect on our near-term missile defense effectiveness, and space-based intercept capability will have a dramatic effect on our long-term defense. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak today, and I very much look forward to your questions. So thank you very much.
General, thank you. A fantastic overview, and I think just showing that these disruptive technologies have a range of benefits. We're not just looking at one or two areas, but how they can really make a difference across quite a wide range of operations. I think also highlighting from that the integration, the need to integrate these technologies, not just with the traditional methods that we have, but also with each other. So, for example, looking at AI and space. And I think just finally pulling out the need to work perhaps a bit better with the non-traditional commercial sector that is developing these technologies, and how defense needs to adapt in order to take advantage of the changes and be able to procure these technologies. So finally, if we could move on to Sarah.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and thank you to my co-panelists for setting the scene so well, so I can really build on what they've done and flesh out a little bit how all these developments are seen in China and what China is doing on its part, developing these types of infrastructures that we've just heard about. So let me start with one peculiar installation in Sweden, in Kiruna. That's the China Remote Sensing Satellite North Polar Ground Station, which was opened in late 2016 and is the first fully owned Chinese satellite ground station in the world. All the others are cooperative projects. So the Swedes thought that they were misled, actually, that this was a purely civilian research project. But in actuality, of course, something like a fully civilian space project does not exist in China. And this station was then touted in Chinese military circles as a great achievement because it enhances the Gaofen military satellite constellation data download rate. So contributes directly to a global ISR capability that China is aiming to develop. What is the threat perception that Chinese military planners are starting from? So it's important to note that it's actually two concepts that originated in the United States that have had the most impact here, apart from the, of course, geographic situation of China and the Taiwan situation and everything else. So the two concepts that Chinese military planners are most concerned about are ballistic missile defense and prompt global strike. So these two concepts have been analyzed in thousands of technical articles. Laura Salmon has done terrific work sifting through all that material. And this is just one example that can be found in the literature, an article from 2011 discussing the meaning of prompt global strike for China. And it's interesting to see what kind of conclusions these authors draw from looking at that American concept. So they think China should move away from the nuclear no first use policy, intensify the use of military space systems, enhance the resilience of these infrastructures, better launch vehicles, and more offensive cyber capabilities. So this is an important thing to note, because Chinese analysts think that prompt global strike aims to achieve absolute security for the United States, which will give it a free hand even for a preemptive strike against the, in the view of the Chinese military planners, not completely survivable nuclear deterrent. So China has, on the whole, been focusing on four things. They have been trying to enhance their A2AD capabilities in various ways, mostly by focusing on missiles, but also other technologies. They have focused on developing their capabilities in the maritime domain, going for a global naval, a blue water navy. They have been focusing on building an own power projection capability, for instance, by building carrier strike groups. And then, of course, they are very open to the contributions of AI to the forces, that intelligizing warfare as the next step after informationizing warfare is something that China is pursuing at fast pace, and ethical concerns regarding the problems that the use of AI in warfare could potentially pose are basically absent in Chinese military thinking. So they really embrace the potential that AI yields. Of course, they have studied, as was already mentioned a couple of times, in depth the way that the United States conducts its campaigns and how the system of systems functions. And they have come up with their own way to try and counter this in an asymmetric way by disturbing the system. They call it systems confrontation and system destruction warfare. And the idea is to basically take out all the nodes in a network that enable all these capabilities that are needed to, for instance, conduct precision strikes. So the idea is to combine everything from information warfare, cyber warfare, even psychological warfare, and all other kinetic and non-kinetic capabilities to try and be able to take out the opponent's system while preserving one's own. So this is one of the lessons that China has drawn from analyzing past conflicts, what they think they might be faced with at some point, for instance, regarding Taiwan. And we have been seeing also organizational reforms going on since Xi Jinping took power, in particular the military restructuring since 2015. And they have actually created a new service level force, the Strategic Support Force, that is basically bundling all the capabilities that contribute to the so-called systems destruction warfare. So that's space, that's ISR, it's electronic warfare, any kind of intelligence collection, and of course also psychological warfare operations. And they have elevated the status of the rocket force, which was previously called Second Artillery, to an actual service. So that is the main indication that this is taken very, very seriously, also on an organizational level. And turning now to some individual developments that are rather fascinating highlights of what China is trying to do. So when it comes to AI and precision strike, we know from people like the person who is quoted here, Wang Changqing, who is a missile development official, who has publicly stated that cruise missiles will utilize AI to enhance their precision and give them new capabilities. So he actually estimated at the time that China was leading the world in this type of integration of AI into cruise missile capabilities. And China is, of course, the country with the most active and diverse ballistic missile development program in the world, whether it's in numbers, type, or capability. And it has also the largest inventory in the world in short and medium range ballistic missiles. Interesting, according to a recent study by the IISS, about 95% of the missile arsenal in terms of ballistic missiles and cruise missiles that China has fall within the range of what would be prohibited if China had joined the INF treaty. So if China were to join such a treaty, they would stand to lose 95% of the missiles, amounting to about 2,200 of them. And this means, of course, that China doesn't have an interest in joining such an arms control initiative in the first place. In addition to these missiles mainly used for the A2AD strategy, China has also, of course, developed a very diverse and increasingly sophisticated range of civilian space launch vehicles with very heavy lift and super heavy lift vehicles that we've been seeing lifting off from Wenchang Spaceport on Hainan Island, the LM5, and there's an even larger one in development. And these will be needed for the manned human missions, also to Mars, also the building up of a space station that is currently going on. A lot has been said already about hypersonics, and China is, of course, on record as having already tested its own version of a hypersonic light vehicle, the DFZF. Recently, there was a study by Cameron Tracy and David Wright that threw into doubt a little bit the actual revolutionary potential of hypersonic light vehicles, stating that some modeling had shown that they would be visible to space-based sensors for the majority of the flight. So it might more be an evolutionary than a revolutionary development. However, the Chinese are already thinking about developing swarms, intelligent swarms, utilizing AI again, to operate such glide vehicles in swarm formation, which would, of course, the idea would be to conduct saturation attacks to fool missile defense. So there's a contest already going on in terms of countering potential countermeasures against these systems. China is, of course, also developing a longer range submarine launched ballistic missile, the Julang 3, which has also already been tested. If it's true that it actually has a 12,000 to 14,000 kilometers range, that would give China effectively the power to threaten part of the continental United States, at least, from a bastion in the South China Sea. So that is a development that could also make quite a bit of a difference in a strategic sense. Now, let me come to some curious infrastructures that are also important for enabling China's programs. So China is the only country in the world currently that has actually floating telemetry stations, satellite ground stations on board ships the Yuanwang class vessels, 4 of them currently in operation. And they are usually deployed in far-flung voyages in the South Pacific or the South Atlantic to supplement the existing ground stations on the Northern Hemisphere on Chinese territory during space launches and also during ballistic missile tests. So what you can see here is one case last year where 2 Yuanwang class vessels were deployed to monitor and track and of course control the launch of a satellite from Xichang, a space launch site. So this is a peculiar thing that China is doing. And now let me turn to something that was already mentioned by the previous speakers, this idea of a digital ocean. China is actually also, I think, we're leading the world almost in some of these efforts. And they have a vast ambition. What you can see here is a slide that is a Chinese picture that I overlaid with some English language captions that shows how they aim to basically achieve a complete control and ISR and MDA capability between Hainan Island and the Paracel Islands by combining floating, autonomous gliders with UAVs and with fixed arrays, with sonobuoys on the ground, with platforms for communication, interlinking all that with satellites of various types to transmit the data to supercomputing centers that can use AI algorithms to sift through all that noise. And this is something that is aspirational in part, but make no mistake, many of these individual infrastructures are already in existence and already being deployed, already being tested. And this is another such chart showing the air domain in this regard, so how the UAVs would interlink with mobile communication stations in trucks. And this is really something that's going on for a couple of years now that we should really look more closely into. It goes along with the development of dedicated satellite constellations. Let me mention just 2 of them. One is just being built up. It's a Hainan satellite constellation system combining optical with hyperspectral and SAR satellites with the aim to achieve all-weather, non-stop ship tracking ability between 30 degrees north and south latitudes. So we know now from a technical article that computer simulations have shown that this system will be able, with an accuracy rate of 95%, to track ships of more than 30 meters length in that area in all weather conditions. So that is one of these satellite constellations. And another one, and I'm almost done in terms of my slides, another one is the Jilin constellation, which is theoretically a commercial satellite constellation that made headlines last year when short videos were posted by its maker of showing American airports and the ability of Jilin to identify and track individual commercial aircraft in real time on these airfields. So that's, of course, a very important capability in terms of precision strike if it ever came to that. So to close, the question is all of that indicative of China actually developing something like a prompt global strike capability? Of course, officially, they do not say so. But if you look at all the individual components that would go into such a capability, one can say that almost all of them are under development or already existing. And this means that I think since they tend to interpret every American program, whether funded or not, whether terminated or not, as actually existing and being an actual threat, that they are probably going full throttle for this type of thing. So to close, that would be my current diagnosis of what's going on in China. Thank you very much.